I'm not going to be waiting to be prompted to ask you something, so you can jump in when and if you feel you want to. That passage packs quite a bit of information. There is the act of dispossession. We see a family losing its main livelihood or main source of living. We have the onset of paid wage as an activity for this community that was fully dependent on land. And we have a war. This is 1954. And all these sensibilities are being filtered through the eyes of a 16-year-old. The impact of British occupation of Kenya, 70 years in all, and the beginning of what was, almost concentration camps where people were herded away and villages being departed. The father's hut being unoccupied. I'd like you to jump in and say, how powerful is that as a visual in the writer perhaps unmaking, remaking, and unmaking construction of Kenya and British past. Any of you? Professor Mule, I see you've been nodding vigorously, so you might jump in.
Asante sana Mwalimu Kimani kwa kunialika kujiunga na jopo hili ili tuweze kuzungumzia kitabu hiki cha Ngugi Wa Thiong'o, kitabu ambacho nimekifundisha kwenye kozi yangu inaitwa Imagining Black Freedom, na kitabu ambacho nimekuja kukipenda sana. Wakati nilipopata mwaliko wa mwalimu, nilifikiria ningesema nini, kwa sababu mwaliko ulifika saa 5 asubuhi na jopo linakutana saa 1 jioni. Anyway, I decided to jot together a few notes that reflect my thinking about not only this book, but the work of memoir, particularly things that we tend to ignore. We often think of memoirs as first and foremost subjective, personal narratives. And of course, as literary critics and writers, we all know that, as particularly in the case of Ngugi Wa Thiong'o, you can't think of his own personal subjective story without thinking about the larger history and larger histories that surround his own childhood and growing up. In fact, I think one of the eminent scholars of Ngugi Wa Thiong'o has observed very cogently that Ngugi's life is wrapped up with the history of central Kenya, right? And I think in many ways, for those of us that have read Wicklow Child, this memoir, when it comes into publication, clarifies so many things that we encounter, especially in the first 3 novels, right? The river between Wicklow Child and A Grain of Wheat. But the one thing that I've often found that as critics we ignore is the role of a memoir as a work of repair. What do I mean by that? I can't help reading through the subjective narrative of Ngugi's life the entire trauma inflicted not only on individuals but families and communities by the experience of colonialism. So what this book, to my mind, does is to debunk in very fundamental ways, and from this very subjective perspective, the whole narrative of colonialism and the whole narrative of globalization as a movement towards modernity and modernization. And in very many ways, then what we witness in this memoir is this young child growing up, experiencing these things, with all the terrifying confusions that colonialism engenders, with all the desires about everything, or for everything colonial, that experience engenders. But finally, emerging from this experience is a person that fundamentally questions the whole colonial enterprise. The second thing that I thought I would say, and especially reading this passage that has just been read, is the way in which colonialism is not just about creating modern nations and modern peoples. It is in fact about destroying people, it's about destroying communities. It is about trauma. And I would like to stop there and pick up later.